All right, I'm ready.
Oh, John Campbell, are you really 75? You are young and spry, the kind of guy who can keep his granddaughters in line. Oh, John Campbell, you always make us laugh. Though when you wore a dress, we must confess that we thought you had gone mad. Oh, we know you are happy and glad that you're not rocking John and her dad. And when we say, yeah, I get the going, yeah, yeah, we're always saying you're doing fine. No, John Campbell, you're okay.
Well, I don't know where to start. It's so hard to say. It would probably be easier to say what things are the same as they were, because there's so few that were. There were transportation was very different. We had automobiles, we had buses, we had trains, and we also had airplanes. But I was never on a plane till I was 17 years old. It was just infrequent travel. Almost nobody flew abroad. You still took ocean liners abroad. My first trip to Europe with a student group, there were flights over and back, but there was no jet travel yet. It didn't start till in the 60s, mid-60s or so. So that was different. We didn't have superhighways. We didn't have interstates, of course, until the Eisenhower years. We had so I can remember we always had cars. We had to drive slower. There were 2-lane highways. There were 4-lane highways other places, but not anywhere around us. We would go visit my mom's, my grandmother and others by train every summer. We'd go spend a couple of weeks in Perry. We ate almost all of our meals at home. Nobody back then, there was no such thing as fast food. There were restaurants and diners, and that was a real treat to be able to go eat there. But and early on there was no frozen food, so until that came in probably during when I was in grade school or junior high, probably grade school. But anyway, in World War II, a lot of that came in and after, so that then people could eat what they wanted that was prepared already, and so on. That's a big change. What other changes? We didn't have television, let alone the internet. We didn't have television until I was junior high. I believe I was junior high, and it was black and white until I was in college when color TV came in. My dad worked, seemed like he worked late every day, and plus half a day on Saturdays. So we often ate without him. He might come home for lunch, because he was only a mile away. So my mom might fix lunch for all of us, and then we would eat scrambled eggs or just something simple at night to tide us over. And my dad probably was grabbing a bite down where he was working, because he was always working late. At least that's my memory of it. After we'd married, and not for long after we'd married, when we realized, that she was pregnant with Carol, I remember being on the phone with my mom to give her the news and tell her that we were going to have a baby, and my mom's first reaction was, "When?" Isn't that something? I can remember this call, and then she was delighted as soon as I told her. But you see what she was thinking, and it's probably not uncommon. She was thinking, well, maybe
That's why you got married.
Yeah, that's why they got married. You know, if I'd said well, it's going to be but it was going to be 7 months after, you know, then she would have, anyway, and she was very happy once she heard the news that it was an appropriate time, maybe 10 months after the wedding or something, you know. Yeah, Marie was, Jean Marie, I think was her real name. It's this toy poodle we had with the French name that we had gotten. I may have gotten that for Gail. I believe I did. I got her for Gail as an engagement present when we got engaged. So she was with us then for years. When she died, Carol would have been, we were still in the townhouse, so Carol would have been 6 or 7 at the most. And she died because she had a I can't remember now what was wrong with her. She had to have surgery. Marie did, and it was one of those sad things where the operation was successful, but the patient didn't make it, you know. So I had to go home and tell people, and so, or that's the way I remember it, that I had to, because I knew. So I told Carol, and Carol looked up and she said, "I'll never smile again." Fortunately, she did. But she did cry then, and she was very close to it. Carol has been married for some time to David Graziano, who's a great guy, and he is, both of my daughters are married to great guys who also have a lot in common in that they have big day jobs, important day jobs, but they really excel as musicians in their nighttime endeavors. And they both are in bands. They've been in those bands for years. And we just enjoy very much going to see them play, hear them play, and look forward to many years of doing that. I don't know really whether it's the worst thing, but I'll tell you the most traumatic thing I can think of. I've been in car wrecks. I've been injured in high school football. I've had cancers. I've had a lot of injuries, and none of them compared in trauma to when I was 17 years old and found out that a former girlfriend was pregnant and said I was the father. I didn't know for a long time whether I was or not. But what happened then was that it was sort of hushed up. She and her family left town. I'm not sure just because of that, but they moved to another town not that far away. I never saw her again. And years went by, and when I turned 60, the winter that I turned 60, I got a phone call from a woman who is, I guess, in her early 40s, and said she was trying to get in touch with her birth parents because her doctors had said, you know, this is something you really need to do, so you know what is in store for you, genetically or congenitally, or in any event. I said, yeah, that would have been me, and the two of us got a blood test and determined 99% sure that I was her father. She was in Iowa. She had 2 children, both grown, and a husband. I flew out there and met her, and I've only seen her once since, and that was at her daughter's wedding. Really, we didn't hit it off that much for a lot of reasons.
What was her name?
Her name is Vicki. Vicki and I and her husband, Andy, they're nice people and we got along fine, but we really have a lot of differences, religion-wise, politics-wise, theologically. ideologically, just not a good fit. But what did happen on that trip, I didn't meet her son, Caleb. I've only met him once, and that was at her daughter's wedding, Daniela's wedding. But I did get to know Daniela, and we hit it off. And Daniela, who's now the mother of 3 children, and lives in Walnut Creek, California, with her husband, Chad. We have stayed in touch, and we've become close, and she's close to our family. She's amazingly, she's the age of my younger daughter, Kay. When I met her, she was just finishing college, and we have visited her. We visited in 2012. They visited here. We plan to see them again, and it was real fine, and we were really tickled that happened. So out of trauma can come good things. Julie and I have a lot in common. We both came to Washington in the late 60s. Both came with a spouse and 2 children. We no longer have those spouses, but we have and enjoy those children. So I met her in, I think, the late 70s. But the unusual thing about it and about us is that we knew each other for 10 years before we ever dated, let alone got married. And I recommend that to anybody. Most of you aren't going to do that. Most people aren't going to do that, and it may not be natural. But if you can become friends first and know someone really well first before you ever fall in love, I think you're better off. In my case, I'm not sure I would have gotten married again if I hadn't met Julie. It's another reason that I'm really glad that I packed up and moved my family to Washington, because I never probably would have met her. And after I met her, we met because of a very good friend of hers who worked with both of us. One had worked with her at the Cost of Living Council when Julie was there, then was still there when I did a stint with the Council on Wage and Price Stability in the Carter administration. Am I that old? The Carter administration. And Becky introduced us. She had a dinner party after I just left there, wanted me to meet her, and or her to meet me, or both of us to meet each other. And I brought my then girlfriend to that dinner. So we hit it off. We were good friends. We played tennis once or twice a year. She had a big Christmas party, she and her children. I would take my kids to it, or my then girlfriend, or whatever. For 10 years, we were really good friends. And then something happened, and it became a lot more than that. And I'm really glad it did. I recommend marriage, but I think you shouldn't get married unless you're really sure. I think I feel really good about my children's marriage, my daughter's marriages, and they married somebody and we're very fond of them. I think it's wonderful. I don't think you ought to do it, though. I think maybe part of the success of some people, including them, is living with somebody before you get married. You get to know them pretty well, and then you can try it out. We couldn't have done that back in our day. In any event, Julie is a very special person. We are really different in personalities, but we're a lot alike in worldviews. And I think you need to know that about someone, if you can, before you marry them, or before you plan to spend a lot of time or your life with them. One other thing I would say that Julie and I have together is that we like to do the same things. I think that's important. We both like to read. We both like to go to our cabin on the bay. We both like to travel. We have good friends. We like each other's friends. All those things are important. And we like each other's families. So I wanted to add one more thing about Julie. I can't say enough, and I don't know.
can't remember what all I've said, but I just did want to say that she's wonderful. I'm very glad I'm married to her. I would tell you all the ways that she's wonderful, but most of the people that watch this show, I think, already know her, so I don't need to. And those that don't know her wouldn't believe me. You know, every person of a certain age, or maybe any age, should look back and said, if this is all I did, what have I done? And what did it mean? And are you proud of that? So I thought, you know, there's no big single accomplishment, but I've had a number of mostly modest ones, I guess, like a lot of people have. And everybody has to judge his or her own on how important they are or how proud to be of them. And mine are varied. One of them would be just the decision to move, just having the nerve, in fact, back then, which most people don't, to move out of the small town in the home state and move across the country to Washington. And I've never regretted that for a minute. I'm really glad I did. And to establish a different career or career path, and then change that a number of times. And to have my own business or businesses. Another one was that one of my, before starting my own business, one of my career stops was to work for the National Cancer Institute for a couple of years, technically as a consultant, but a full-time consultant, helping run the first anti-smoking education program for them. And I've always been very proud of that I had a hand in it. And it's one of those things, and too often in health education and in health generally, you don't ever get to see the results of what you did in health communications. And you've been able to, and I rarely have, but I have in that sense. And it has had an impact, a great impact, not just because of the Cancer Institute, but from a lot of different sources. And I've always been proud of that. Another accomplishment I really believe was marrying Julie. Connecting with Julie and then having enough common sense to marry her 10 years after we'd become friends. And I know it wasn't just my decision, but it's something that I'm proud of. And that was now 20 years ago, over 20 years ago. Another was quitting smoking. And the irony of that was that 34 years after, with just a lucky, fortunate break, after a number of years after I had been treated for prostate cancer, I had it recur, and with a scan to find out whether to make sure it had not spread, the scan revealed, because it went beyond its intended scope, it revealed a spot on the bottom of my right lung, just that one part of the right lung, and there was a spot, and it turned out to be lung cancer, small cell lung cancer. Now, I can't say I'm just proud of that, but it was an accomplishment. And as you said at the time, you know, Dad, prostate cancer saved your life, because in effect it really did. And I wouldn't be telling this story today if it hadn't been for that scan. You know, as I've gotten older, one thing I've been surprised by, and maybe more so in recent years, in recent months, is the times that I feel a sort of a sadness that I can't really identify, or it's unexpected and I can't really say where it comes from. The same way sometimes with joy. But here's an example is last week we took granddaughter Devin and her buddy to see Music Man, a revival of Music Man at Arena Stage. It was a wonderful show. And I found myself tearing up at almost every song, at least those songs that were really, I remembered very well, and they were very romantic and very old-fashioned. And I realized that where that comes from, I think, it's when something reminds me of my past, deep past, or of history whether I was alive then or not, like I wasn't at the time of Music Man, but reminds me then of my parents. I'm filled with sort of a mixture of joy and sadness, because I think they're not very far apart, and they just come upon you by surprise. I wouldn't want it any other way. I think that's what life is. It's a combination of those. The best emotion, the most important emotions probably you have are joy and sadness, the most meaningful ones anyway. And so I'm glad I have them. In 1995, you, Kay, our producer director of this video, had the idea at her young age of doing a memoir, family memoir, family history, history of my mother, and interviewed her, I think, 2 times, and then put them together and produced this audio, not video, but audio history of Mary Lee Campbell's life and memories. And it was very well received. In fact, it was wonderfully received by everybody in the family, particularly because Mom died the next year. She was killed. She died a week after an accident involving a drunk driver. And the family really appreciated it that much more. So I guess that had something to do with Kay's interest in doing this one, because in a way that led years later to the idea of doing one for me, or on me. And I'm really glad that she did. I think she's done a great job on it. Took her a while. Took us all a while, but now we're in the home stretch. And I think it's good. I'd recommend it to any families. So I just wanted to say that, and thank you, Kay, for coming up with this. I think it's going to be a great show. I'm just really, I'm really grateful, thankful almost, but grateful for having this opportunity to talk about what's been important to me and what's happened to me, because I'm so grateful for the life that I've had, the friends that I've made, and in most cases have kept, the wonderful family that I have, and the many things that I've done, the traveling that I've done, all the minor accomplishments that I've had. And the greatest of these, I think, is family. And I'm not done yet.